EU boss, we will break up the USA. That's not Alex Jones saying they're planning that. That's out of his mouth, Juncker. There's video of it. EU could break up the U.S. Juncker in jaw-dropping threat to Trump over support for Brexit. They've swallowed England without a vote ever happening, make 91% of their laws. The Brits don't like it, and they're so arrogant, they've said, we'll march our military into other states that try to leave. They don't dare say that to England. But they dare say it to France, to Germany, to Italy, to Greece, to Spain. The EU has been threatening to send in EU troops into Catalonia. Because those folks aren't Spanish, they're not French, they're their own group that goes back more than 5,000 years. Very interesting culture. The point is that's the big, that's who makes all the money and is the most creative in Spain. They're also the area that held out and never got taken over by the Muslims. But if you continue to break all this down and understand the history of it, they've said, we'll march EU troops in if you don't stay under Spain and the EU. This is military threat. And I guess no one took Hitler serious till he started going into Danzig and into Czechoslovakia and then into Poland and, of course, into Austria. And then you know the rest of the story, into France, and then into North Africa, and then into Russia. And NATO's ignoring, our troops in NATO are under NATO command, ignoring what a U.S. president says. That freaks Trump out. You want to know why Trump's freaked out? He's learned that our military is basically run by NATO when it's in NATO. And NATO is the UN, EU, globalist army. And we're right back where we were, and Russia doesn't like the EU, and American patriots don't like the EU. And so they say, oh, we're with Russia because we don't like a giant authoritarian state with nuclear weapons threatening to invade everywhere, and the EU is what's trying to gobble up all the member states around Russia. The EU is a giant, disgusting, unelected creature. The EU was set up as a steel deal in the Treaty of London, and then a decade later completed in the Treaty of Rome in 1956, 1949, then 1956. It's all in my film Endgame. I show all the documents, all the treaties. But then it allowed the co-opting of the politicians to then start creating boards that transferred power out of the country. And then suddenly you wake up and you're under EU control, and they're saying, we will march troops into Greece, into Italy. We will do whatever we want. And the EU was openly involved in the election, remember, giving money and trying to stop Trump and running bots. Then they say the Russians. The EU is way more powerful than Russia economically. The EU has an economy that is the third largest, if not the second largest in the world, depending on how you slice it. Because you got the U.S. still number one, China number two, the EU a close third. But you really look at real industrialization and stuff, you could argue when it comes to high-tech and industrialization, Europe is numero uno because the elite are based there. The public doesn't get any of it. You go to Switzerland or something, it's like you're in a spaceship, surrounded by beautiful green mountains everywhere. It's like, what's going on here? You go there, you don't ever want to come back. EU could break up the U.S. Juncker in jaw-dropping threat to Trump over support for Brexit. European Union boss Jean-Claude Juncker. They had Nazi aircraft called Junkers. That's his family name. This afternoon issued a jaw-dropping threat to the United States, saying he could campaign to break up the country in revenge for Donald Trump's supportive comments about Brexit. You're not a country. The people don't want to be in it. The member states didn't get to vote on it. But let's go look at the girl in the leotard. That's probably more important. Better looking at Juncker, I'll tell you that. And they just goes through it all. So this is where we stand. This is where we are. This is what we're dealing with. Communist Chinese, the EU, all in our business. saying, get out of our business or we'll get in your business. Hey, the EU is the global government. It is in our business. It's our enemy. It's a whole region already taken over. We want to free them. We want to be free. We want Russia to be free. We want North Korea to be free. We want Venezuela to be free. Now, I'm calling him Juncker. It's Juncker, Jean-Claude Juncker. He's the head of the EU. And I've read so much history that I went, you know, I know who he is. He was the president of Luxembourg, which is the richest little country in the world, tax exempt, and it makes Switzerland look poor in the type of money and drug money and you name it that goes through it. And basically NATO launders its money through it. So Jean-Claude Juncker, or Juncker, is how, if you just spelled it out without the German pronunciation. I was sitting there thinking about him, and I went, wait a minute, the most powerful family in Germany that backed Hitler was the Junkers. And I remember reading about the Junkers, and they even had their aircraft company, Juncker, that had bombers and fighter bombers and all the rest of it from World War II. There's the Junkers, Ju-88. There were a bunch of them. They had Junker dive bombers that would accelerate down and then scream back up. That way they could hit their targets dead on. Made a lot of loving weapons. The Ju-88C, the Ju-88R. Again, let's look at the dive bomber. Let's go back up to the top there, where it lists all the aircraft they made. There's like 15 of them or so there. Yeah, go to the dive bomber. There you go. The loving, oh, they really liked those in Greece when they first used a bunch of those when they came in Greece, and then would dive bomb all the fortresses and emplacements with them. Talk about horrifying. Yes, they made the first attack bomber. So, it's just interesting to have background, because that's why I get so frustrated when I see these people on TV. I see Juncker on TV, and then I immediately get pissed because my brain pulls up. Yeah, there's the famous dive bomber. In fact, the biggest ace of World War II, I forget his name, was a German dive bomber. He destroyed like 500 Russian tanks with his dive bomber Juncker aircraft. 500, and that was the confirmed kills. Then they what was his name? Then they took him out of that when the jets came out, and I was watching an interview with him before he died. And you got to admit the Germans did have the best aces, because they would just stay in the air like 15 hours a day. And when the jet got shut down, he turned it around on a road and was blowing tanks up with it, with his cannon as they came down the road. I mean, just crazy stuff. Yeah, it was like something like 500 tanks he blew up with his Junker. So let's talk about who real Nazis are, shall we? Because this guy was alive when this was going on, and we need to do an investigative report on his family, because they were basically the nobility and ruled Prussia, which was the jewel of the crown of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And guess what Prussia did? It produced slave soldiers who were so into being slaves in their fancy black Hessian boots and their blue uniforms that they were proud that they were raised for their entire life to fight and die. So that's where the Nazis got that particular leadership of submarine captains and people that didn't care about dying, whole crews that wanted to die. Nobody cared. They were just ready to kill. Came out of Prussia. And who helped set it up? And modern psychiatry and everything out of Prussia? Our little boss that says he'll break the U.S. up. And he means it. And he's threatening to, of course, he's from Luxembourg now, because he can tax the Germans and suck off of them and have them fund the whole EU, while he and his family sit tax-free in Luxembourg. He is a Luxembourg politician. Since 2014, Juncker has been president of the European Commission, which is unelected, I should point out, but runs it, which is the European Union EU executive branch that just created itself. Mein Führer. What about real Nazis? That's one on screen, baby. That's the real deal. You want to talk about Count Dracula? You're looking at it. And just pull up his family. In fact, let's pull up his bio. Let's get in his whole deal. Born in 1954, I guess he looks old. He missed it. His major influence was his father, Joseph, who was forcibly conscripted. Oh, of course. Everyone got an order to be conscripted. You didn't volunteer into this. That's the little lawyer game they play. You get the order, you go in. It isn't. Born in 54, his major influence was his father, Joseph, who was forcibly conscripted into the Nazi army, just like George Soros, during the war and packed off the Russian front. He bore the scars of combat, mental and physical, for the rest of his days, but stoically declined to discuss his suffering. Oh, the Nazi soldier of the richest family in Germany is he's so good. He had to do it. He got ordered to. But it gets better. It gets better. See, this is why I get frustrated constantly. George Soros, for 4 years, had a Hungarian handler, and they would send him in when he was 13, 14, 15, 16 to ferret out where Jews were hidden. And then they would rob all their stuff and sell them out to the Nazis. And there's been books written by Jewish historians, you name it, about Madeleine Albright's family. Remember, she got caught with the stolen art worth tens of millions in her house, stolen from Jews that were killed. She was Jewish. Her dad managed selling Jews out. Juncker attended a boarding school in Belgium, a university in Alsatian, where he is thought to have met his future wife. Christine's father was one of Hitler's so-called propaganda commissars. Oh, he married into one of the top Hitler, of course, and was among those responsible for the Germification of his home country of Luxembourg. Oh, exactly. See, it's not just he moved there to be tax exempt. They took it over. Nice little duchy for him. He also helped enforce the Nuremberg laws that stripped Jews of their rights and was the precursor to the Holocaust. Told you. See, notice I told you all this about Juncker without even having to pull it up because I've read 500 books on Nazi Germany, if I've read one. And I see these, it's like Schwarzenegger loves Hitler, told Rolling Stone he loves Hitler, he wants to be a dictator, he wants our guns, he wants open borders. So the Republicans worship him. He would meet friends at the door in an SS uniform saying, Heil Hitler. So he gets an ADL award. I fight Nazis. The ADL lies about me because the ADL, in my research, is just the same brand of Jews that sit on top of the Jews and feed on them generationally over and over again. It's disgusting. And then they have these articles, oh, Alex hates Jews. Oh, yeah, right. There he is wearing a SS officer's belt. But it's no big deal. His dad was an SS officer in the Gestapo. Oh, that's right. He wasn't just in the armed SS or the commandos. He was, oh yeah, there he is, a Nazi naval belt. But just listen, his dad was so good, he stayed behind in the war in Austria to make sure everybody behaved themselves. And then his older brother, who died before him, because he was alive during the war, Arnold was born after the war a few years, died in a car wreck, but he was the favorite. He was the product of an approved SS marriage. See, I love how Nazi this, Nazi that, but then no one even really knows anything about it. Yes, Gustav Schwarzenegger. Here, let's just go over all that for you. Now, let's continue here. Let's hear, though, about the Nazis now from the Forward, the biggest Jewish newspaper in the United States, because Media Matters put an article out on me yesterday. Pro-Trump radio host Alex Jones rants that George Soros is the head of the Jewish mafia. They then don't give all my quotes or all my comments where I said he was a Nazi that fed on Jews and rounded them up. And then today he has been caught in the WikiLeaks trying to bring down Israel and break it up. That's in the WikiLeaks show because I don't want to blow up Israel and turn it over to the Islamicists. I am now anti-Jew. Total inversion of reality. They've made thousands of movies about Nazi Germany and then somehow projected the guilt onto the American people in Hollywood. But you've never seen a Hollywood movie where they actually show you where all the really was happening with the Nazis and what they're really up to and what's really happening. But I'm digressing. I've got so much to cover. But see, I could do that with any one of these articles today. I could give you a whole background on, oh, this guy says he'll break the U.S. up. He says he'll march troops into all these EU countries. When his family marched into Luxembourg and captured it in World War II, and he was the head of it until 4 years ago when he got to the top slot of the unelected EU. Jean-Claude Juncker is a unelected dictator of the dictatorship that's the EU. And ladies and gentlemen, they have the communist Chinese dictator who was elected by the Central Committee and Politburo show up at Davos 2 months ago and say, together, the EU and China will lead the world and we will defeat Trump and this nationalist populist movement. Every American should have gotten behind Trump at that moment. This is absolute organized crime, declaration of war with the biggest crime lord in the history of the world, the Communist Chinese, openly announcing they're working with Zuckerberg and everybody else to start censoring us. Zuckerberg is now censoring any criticism of Islam on Facebook under orders by Pakistan and helping report people who then have their heads chopped off. In Pakistan, that was on the news yesterday. You cannot make up the magnitude. We got radical Islam. We got weirdo Nazis running EU, threatening to break us up. We've got, with their traitors all in our government. We've got crazy town going on, and then we've got the media saying Donald Trump's a Russian agent and he's being investigated and he might have to be overthrown and we might need COG. And, you know, just cancel Congress for 6 months because it's all the Republicans now. They all came in on a fake election. Everybody else better get in line now. A few Republicans that say they want Trump out of office, like these senators, you can stay. You're part of the club. Everybody else, the American people don't like globalism, don't like being sold out. We're just going to cancel everything. And they're up at the edge of the cliff. Oh, yeah, now the New York Times says Trump's a Chinese agent. That's right, I forgot that one from yesterday. They've now got themselves up to the edge of the cliff. And they're thinking, are we going to jump? Are we going to jump? And they're kind of, and they're led by a bunch of loons like Nancy Pelosi and Jean-Claude Juncker, the war criminal Nazi family of all families. I mean, if there were 9 ringwraiths and Hitler was Sauron, the Junkers are like the Witch King. I like to use those allegories because they're good for what we're facing. And, of course, he was in World War I, the guy that wrote that, and said there's a lot of parallels to what's happened in Europe and wars in The Lord of the Rings. I don't really like the cheesy movies, but the books are good. The point is that this guy's literally the Witch King of The Lord of the Rings. I mean, if there was Nazgul, he'd be the chief Nazgul, the #2 guy. I mean, these families, ladies and gentlemen, Joseph Mengele is related to him. Look that up. I remember that part. That's the angel of death. Most of what he did was classified, brain transplants, you name it. And little kids, I mean, you name it. And then sometimes for fun, just in the morning, he'd take like 4 or 5 little kids in the back of their big open-top Mercedes out in the field and give them all chocolates. And then pull his Luger out and shoot them all in the head, just for a morning enjoyment. These are really nice people. And I get to have the Jewish newspapers talk bad about me. Isn't that nice? Good. Make up whatever crap you want. I look at the San Diego Jewish World. It looks like a 5-year-old girl wrote the article. Is that in the forward? Here it is, sorry. Josephine Dolstein looks like she's 12 years old. I'm glad you're there to expose the anti-Semites, sweetheart. Thank you. And here's the deal. This has come out in the news. But see, the media won't show you. I mean, does she look? She's about 14, right? Maybe 12? My 13-year-old daughter looks older than her. I'm just saying, this is the person that's writing articles basically trying to edit what I said to sound like I'm saying Jewish mafia is running everything. No. It's not that it's a Jewish mafia running everything. It's that there is a powerful Jewish mafia that I've studied that more than any other mafia, and all mafias feed on their own people and they're protecting them. The Jewish mafia has a horrible history, especially in Europe, of making Jews pay to get out and then double-crossing them on top of it. And it was equivalent of $1 million US dollars at that time. Again, my grandfather grew up in a wealthy area in a mainly kind of German enclave in Dallas. And he, again, there was a guy who had a factory, but he had his tinkering shop that was a factory down the road. And my grandfather, from the time I was a little kid, worked over there. And he was German. He wasn't Jewish, the guy down the street. And he was a famous guy. My grandfather told the story a couple times, who had invented a lot of the modern refrigeration you see. So he's very, very rich. But he had family still in Germany and still spoke with a German accent. You know, my grandfather was several generations, back Germans that had come over. But even back then, Germans kind of lived in their own areas sometimes. That's the way it is in big cities. But the point is that he watched all his companies get sold and everything gone while my grandfather was off in World War II. And he came back and everything had been taken from the guy because the Nazis had so many agents inside the United States. They were threatening to kill his family in Germany if he didn't give him all his money. That's why my grandfather hated Nazis so much. And then there were so many Nazis. And I remember my mom, because it wasn't known that they'd brought over 36,000 plus Nazis, just 36,000 Nazi scientists in the rat line for NASA and so many other places. And my grandfather was a lease hound. And so he would drive around all over New Mexico, all over Texas. And the only places to get food sometimes or gas would be military bases. And he would just talk about, and he was part German, so he was proud to be part German, proud of his ancestry, but he would get so mad at the arrogant Nazis all just sitting around inside the military bases, shooting their mouths off. He told me a couple stories, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Let's just say there were some fights. But the point is that I know all about this, and it really is disgusting what the sellout media, whether it's the Jewish press and all this, that always attacks people that expose this. And I just have to ask the Forward and everybody else, what the hell, man? I mean, are you really want to be complicit in covering up this stuff that's going on when when any Jews I talk to that are educated know all about this? Most Jews I know are pissed off about this. Take Steve Pachinik. He's Jewish. He hates it. He'll talk about it. He'll tell you all about it. And he actually had family that didn't make it out of Europe. Roosevelt wouldn't, it's just a whole other story. We'll be back with other news, though. But there's the truth about who wants to break up America. A filthy, rich, scumbag Nazi. So I just spent probably 30 minutes on Jean-Claude Juncker. And if you want to research him and his family, I walked in there and I went, the Junkers are one of the most powerful families in Germany, top 3. They created mind war, mind control. They basically hijacked Luxembourg. I said, look that up. And then you look it up, and it's worse than I said. I mean, you study the people at Bilderberg, it'll make your mouth hang open. They'll usually have a few people there that they're grooming to be president to see if they're going to play ball. Rick Perry went. They didn't like him. I'm not saying Perry's perfect, but they didn't like him. Peter Thiel's gone, but he's doing a lot of good. So if you judge a tree by its fruits. But the old guys that set it up, it was the Nazi families left over from World War II in a true armistice meeting that they began to have in 1945. It didn't officially get a name until 1954, 9 years later in Oosterbeek, Holland, at the Bilderberg Hotel. And see, they hope you're not informed. I'm informed, and I'm not bragging. I'm on target. I have their whole plan. So this isn't a Nazi conspiracy. It's like Hydra. And again, they put that in movies. It shows how this is known. That's what's so frustrating. Look at how the mainly Jewish comic book writers create Hydra and all this, and it's dead on, shadow, underground, eugenic-style government, because the Jews have been assaulted by this. I'm telling you, anybody who's informed knows about this. I'm not, like, making up some new cosmology here. This is real. Then they turn it into Red Skull and all this stuff, and it becomes a joke, and then they have the Forward come out and attack me because I'm warning everybody about this. I don't like George Soros, the Nazi collaborator that rounded up thousands of Jews and robbed them to their deaths. He went on 60 Minutes and said he's not ashamed of that because he survived. A greedy monster. And then the alchemy is he's good, give him ADL awards. Alex Jones is anti-Semitic. And I don't even run from that. I don't sit there and say I'm not because I want to curry favor with the dying MSM and all the traitors to humanity that are involved in it, and Hollywood and just all the pedophilia and just evil people. whether they're German or Chinese or Jewish background or Christian, whatever you call yourself. I don't like evil people. And folks better realize how much danger they're in, because this whole globalist program is the Nazi program that failed, but it didn't come from Nazis. The Nazis were a globalist empire test of the groups operating in Europe, operating in England, operating in the U.S. In the 1850s, the British royalty launched their mind war and eugenics programs to counter their German cousins, because they were German. They were related to the Junkers and others. They knew the British royalty is German. It has been since George I. We defeated George III. And so they accelerated their mind war program to counter the Germans, because they were cousins, but they were fighting with each other, literal cousins. You know, so these globalists are lazy, okay? Junkers didn't capture all this. His parents did. We're going to defeat them. We're going to break them. We will break you, Juncker. We will break you. Yeah, old Juncker, heir of the great Nazi fortunes and great stolen hoards. They took to Luxembourg, the biggest money laundering operation on the planet. He says he'll break up the United States using political forces. And, of course, Turkey says they'll break up the EU or have their Islamists burn everything down if the EU doesn't capitulate to them. I love how it's all these different thug groups and criminal groups threatening each other. And, you know, when I say Turkey threatened, quote, holy war to overthrow Europe if they don't let more Muslims in, which is, why would you do that? They're holding you hostage already. It's not going to get better. Or that Juncker has come out in a speech saying we'll break up the United States, meddling in our internal affairs. It sounds like a lie when I say it. But it's the top of Drudge. It's officially released by him. Of course, I already knew this was all happening, but you see, that's why they got to bring down InfoWars. Because everything we've talked about that was under the waves, submerged, is now emerging. It was always there. And people were like, it's exactly what he said. Word for word coming up out of the water. What? How did he have X-ray vision? No. The globalists think you're stupid, and they write white papers to themselves, and then they write stuff for the public. And for the public, they'll have some narcissistic tart up there, you know, doing selfies with blown up ugly, you know, lips with a bunch of injections. And they'll have some idiot sports team running around with guys slapping each other on the butts. And then they'll have some other stupid diversions or Nostradamus crap. And then meanwhile, the EU was set up. Oh, I forgot this. See, that's the problem with the history lesson. That's how my memory works. I'm like, Juncker. I know he's the head of the EU. He used to be the head of Luxembourg. I know he's nobility out of Germany and Alsatian. And then, yeah, sure enough, Alsatian on one side, top advisor to Hitler, his wife's father, his family, the richest, probably the second or third richest Germans, German royalty, the heads of Prussia, the Prussian royal family. The military state of Germany was Prussia. That's what they did. Everything you saw pour out in World War I and pour out in World War II came right out of that mouth.